Now, Cambodia was not on the TBB list of tour options, so I continued to liaise with Duncan after my 2015 trip and asked if it might be possible to organise a custom tour to include Cambodia. Thankfully, he agreed and he put together a special trip for us. There would be just 4 of us this time: Duncan and Alan, one of Duncan's good friends, Bernard, my riding buddy, and me. I think Duncan welcomed the idea of doing a trip with a small, hard riding group. Now, we would need to start in Pattaya, which is over 500 miles south of the TBB shop in Chiang Mai. I managed to persuade Duncan to bring the bikes to Pattaya on a truck, rather than us having to fly into Chiang Mai and then ride all the way down, which would have been a real pain for Bernard and me. So the plan was to ride through Cambodia, visiting Phnom Penh and the killing fields, and then on to Siem Reap to visit the famous Angkor Wat. From there we'd cross into Laos and ride from the south to the north this time, the opposite of what I'd done the year before, then cross into northern Thailand and finally back to Chiang Mai, approximately 2,100 miles in all. Now, Duncan knew that Bernard and I wanted this trip to be a real riding adventure, and he promised that the trip would be hardcore. Hotels only booked at the start and the end, no support vehicle, pack light, carry your own luggage. Definitely an adventure, not a holiday. So, bring it on. On the 30th of January 2016, Bernard and I flew Thai Airways from Heathrow to Bangkok. We arrived at 5:30 the next day and got a taxi to Pattaya Beach, where this adventure into Cambodia would start. The bikes for this trip would be Honda CBX 500 Twins. No more BMW for me, as apparently it proved hard to get BMW parts in Thailand. And the thing is, I'm 6'4", and I have to say that the Honda was really too small for me. I developed a love-hate relationship with it during the next couple of weeks. I'll tell you more about that later. It was really hot, 30 degrees plus, when we arrived in Pattaya, which is right by the sea. Thankfully the hotel let us into the rooms early. After a shower we went straight to the beach and found a nice bar with cold beer, which happened to be served by a fascinating ladyboy waitress who was keen to chat. Now, we met up with Duncan and Alan later, and they showed us the town at night. Totally crazy seaside resort, lots of bars, lots of people, lots of ladyboys. The plan was to leave at 7 AM the next morning to try and miss some of the traffic and before it got to be really hot. So the next morning we were up early and we set off before breakfast, which actually didn't start till 8. And by 1 PM we'd ridden 360 kilometres and were close to the Cambodian border. We found a nice hotel called Meet the Sea, which was right on the beach on the Gulf of Thailand. And that afternoon we explored the local area and visited a couple of small fishing villages and took a dip in the hotel pool. Well, it certainly feels like a holiday so far. The next day was the 3rd of Feb. I started with an early morning walk along the beach, and then we had a 9 o'clock start to ride the short distance to the Cambodian border. All went well on the Thai exit side and through passport immigration on the Cambodian side. Then we were shown to the Customs and Excise office, which was a small roadside hut. Duncan produced the paperwork necessary to import the bikes. One of the officials, who was obviously the main man, spoke English and told us that the rules had changed and we had the wrong forms. Therefore we would have to leave the bikes there and proceed without them. Not what we wanted to hear. Duncan asked how much the right form would cost, thinking the guy was after a backhander. But he said no, we would have to get the right form from the capital, Phnom Penh. And we sat in the little hut looking at each other glumly. This was not going well. I explained to the guy that we'd come all the way from England just to see Cambodia, and we could only do that if we could ride our bikes. Now, for some reason he started to loosen up a bit, and suddenly announced that his daughter was currently in England to learn English. in Canterbury. We chatted a bit about England, and finally he said yes, we could take our bikes as long as we came back through this border point again on our exit from Cambodia. So we said yes, having no intention of actually doing that, just wanted to get moving. He said we should pay his men 400 Thai bahts, which is about £8, to do the paperwork. Bargain, I reckon. And there we were on our way to Kompot, our planned destination for the night. We had 300 kilometres to ride. The roads were good, we were happy. We stopped for lunch, noodle soup of course. Our hotel that night was on the banks of a major river delta, and we watched the sunset and discussed over a few beers whether the rules had really been changed. Didn't seem to be about money. Maybe the boss man just wanted to make us sweat because he could. We wondered what might happen when we came to leave Cambodia and they check our paperwork at the northern border with Laos. Hey, but tomorrow's another day. Let's have another beer. So we set off for the next morning to ride the 360 kilometres to the capital Phnom Penh, and after a short while Duncan signalled to us to take a detour, which turned out to be 25 kilometres of really good, smooth, twisty road up the side of a mountain through a national park. It was really strange riding that Honda 500. I'm used to my GS 1200, which has loads of grunt. I'd never ridden a bike with such a small engine that really needed the gearbox to be worked hard to get any real power out of it. At the top was a giant Buddha, and it was time to create the Four Amigos photo. After a while we rode back down the mountain and got on the road to Phnom Penh, which soon turned out to be the straightest, dustiest, noisiest, hottest and nastiest piece of road I think I've ever ridden. Surrounded by maniac drivers coming at us from all directions. I thought riding in Thailand was pretty crazy, and then I found Cambodia. The rules of the road are that there are no rules. You aim where you want to go and you just do it. No need to look or indicate, don't worry if you drive against the traffic flow. And then we reached the outskirts of Phnom Penh. Total chaos. Cars, lorries, tuk-tuks, motorbikes, scooters, millions of them, all fighting for the same piece of road. The only answer is you go with the flow, but make sure to stand your ground, and somehow it all seems to work. Now Phnom Penh is a large city of approximately 2 million people, and we found a hotel in the riverside area, which is one of the best parts of town. The hotel even let us park our bikes in the reception area. Now this part of the city has lots of bars and restaurants nearby and plenty of nightlife. But then later in the evening we saw the other side of Phnom Penh as we passed lots of homeless women with their children sleeping rough nearby to our hotel. The following day was a rest day, and it was our chance to visit the killing fields. Now back in 1975 the Khmer Rouge leader Pol Pot intended to create a communist peasant society, and he set about the systematic killing of all intellectuals and anyone who stood in the way of building his communist society. Over 1 million Cambodian people were murdered in this genocide over a 4-year period, and this led to the creation of the so-called killing fields. Bernard and I found a tuk-tuk to take us the 10 kilometres to one of the main sites, which was now enshrined as a museum and monument to the many dead. The driver said he would wait to take us back afterwards. We strolled around the site, and in the middle was a multi-storey glass tower filled with the skulls of men, women and children who had perished there. Yeah, it really does make you wonder how humans can do such things to each other. Afterwards we looked for our tuk-tuk driver, but he was nowhere to be seen. He'd abandoned us. Finally managed to find another one who would take us back to the city. And you know, we bumped into the original guy later outside our hotel asking for his money. He must be joking, mate. It's now the 6th of Feb, and today we will ride the 300 kilometres to Siem Reap, Cambodia's second largest town and the location of the famous World Heritage Site Angkor Wat. Now we set off at 7 a.m. in an attempt to avoid the heat and the worst of the traffic, so no breakfast again. They don't get up early here. I've definitely developed a love-hate relationship with the Honda CBX 500 Twin. First, the good things. It seems to be reliable. It takes everything we throw at it and comes back for more. And on a nice smooth road it handles quite well. It towers over the many motos and scooters here, and it's red. But it's a small bike with not a lot of power. The screen is rubbish, there's no wind protection, and above 100 kilometers per hour I am like a windsock, and I've got to hang on for dear life, which produces shoulder burn after a while. The seat also gives me arseache. And when you hit some nasty bumps leaned over, the suspension tries to tie itself in knots. But it's going to get me all the way to Chiang Mai, I hope. To our dismay, the road soon turned to dirt, a red earth in fact. The cars, trucks, buses, motorbikes all jostled for position on this two-way road. The traffic created so much dust, it was like riding literally through a red mist, and we were covered from head to toe in red dirt, as were all the houses and any people by the side of the road. It was actually difficult to see far enough ahead in this red mist, but this didn't stop some crazy locals in big pickup trucks speeding down the middle of the road between the two lanes of traffic. This went on for almost 100 kilometres. I tried to remind myself that I wanted an adventure and that Duncan had said it would be hardcore. At one point we stopped for petrol at a small town, and it was a chance to shake off some of the red dust. Had to laugh. Found the sign in the toilet, which was a Western style toilet rather than a normal hole in the ground over here. We finally arrived at Siem Reap and managed to find quite a nice hotel down a quiet side street, and there was time for Bernard and I to visit Angkor Wat. Now we got a tuk-tuk, and the driver turned out to be a really nice guy who looked after us very well and drove us all round the massive site. Angkor Wat dates from the 12th century and was originally a Hindu temple, but evolved into a large Buddhist temple complex. In fact, it's the largest religious monument in the world apparently. It became abandoned for centuries, and in 1860 it was rediscovered by a French explorer, and then later in the 20th century archaeologists helped to restore it and push back the jungle which had engulfed large parts of it. Many of the buildings had been embraced by huge banyan and silk cotton trees. In 1992 it became a World Heritage Site, and more recently was used as a location for the Lara Croft movie Tomb Raider. It's a very popular location and accounts for much of the tourism in Cambodia. Much of the site was literally rammed with Chinese and Japanese tourists who blocked the walkways, stopping all the time to take selfies. Bernard and I clambered over lots of ruins. It's a very impressive place, especially when you consider it dates back from the 12th century. That evening the town of Siem Reap was packed with tourists and backpackers, noisy bars with pushy girls outside trying to drum up business. We did manage to find a relatively quiet restaurant, and we dined on tiger prawns washed down with Pinot Grigio. A fine end to a hard day. The next day it was Sunday the 7th of February. Time to leave Cambodia and head for Laos. We have an 8 a.m. start to make our way to the border. Our entry point would be right at the southern end of Laos, about 800 kilometres south of the capital Vientiane and about 400 miles from Siem Reap. At lunchtime we pulled in at a rough looking cafe somewhere in the wilds, and we were immediately surrounded by a bunch of locals who seemed totally fascinated by us and our bikes. They were friendly and they shook our hands, brought their kids out to shake our hands too. I rolled a cigarette. I used to smoke in those days. Watched closely by this group of men. I don't think they'd ever seen anything like it. so I rolled one for them. There was nearly a fight over who should have it. They tried on our gloves, our jackets, and they were laughing and shouting, and we certainly made their day. On we went to the border, which was very quiet compared to our entry point. There was no one in sight, and finally a guy turned up and the paperwork check started. We didn't show them the form that we'd paid for when we came in, and they didn't actually ask for it. It'd probably been a wind up all the time. Through we went, no problem. So goodbye Cambodia and hello again to Laos. Now the road from the border was a real challenge. 50 kilometres of dirt and broken tarmac with the deepest ruts and holes imaginable. I'm glad I'd done the BMW off-road school. But this little Honda was certainly no GS. The holes were so deep my luggage shook loose and one of the mirrors undid itself and was flapping around. I tell you, I was really glad when we got to the end of that road. Finally we arrived at a hotel in a remote town on an island in the Mekong. There were just us and a few French people as guests. Traditional food for dinner washed down with beer Lao and Johnny Walker Black Label. We slept well that night. We were greeted by a lovely sunrise over the Mekong next day, and we set off to ride the 400 kilometres to Takek, our next destination. The first 10 kilometres was a dirt road again with lots of holes, ruts and clouds of dust. Just what I needed to wake me up fully. The roads here are not just for vehicles, they're also shared by herds of buffalo, cattle, dogs, chickens, goats and everything else. And the buffalo have an annoying habit of sauntering across the road, and they like to wait till we're nearly upon them before they make their move. Now we're now getting deeper into Laos, and you can see it's a simple way of life here. The young children are cute and they wave at us with big smiles as we roar by. When it's lunchtime, it's noodle soup, of course, cooked up in a big pot over a wood fire, which is always on the go. We arrived at our next hotel, again right on the Mekong, and we're welcomed by loud bangs from fireworks. It's the Chinese New Year. I needed to get some Lao money and went to a cash machine and took out 1.5 million kip. Am I a millionaire? No, it's only worth £130. Green curry with prawn for dinner that night, washed down with beer Lao again. Fantastic. The next day we have 360 kilometres to ride to the capital Vientiane. And that night we ate well again in a nice restaurant and enjoyed a couple of bottles of Italian red wine. Now Duncan's original plan was then to continue to ride through Laos to Luang Prabang the next day. But after some discussion we decided perhaps to make a change to the route that would enable us instead to spend a couple of days riding some of the best roads in northern Thailand. So it's now the 10th of February. And after eggs for breakfast we set off for a town called Exabery instead of Luang Prabang. We had about 400 kilometres to ride. Soon after we left Vientiane the road turned to dirt, this time with potholes as deep as wells and ruts like trenches. Traffic was heavy, it was dusty, hot with clouds of white dust covering everything, and we made slow progress. We finally reached the end of that stretch and we started to climb up into the mountains. Fantastic scenery, nice twisty roads, small rural villages along the way. Coming the other way, we met several convoys of Chinese tourists in large four-wheel drive SUVs. At one point we stopped at a small village and all the Chinese rushed over to take our photos. Strange. Lunch was noodle soup again, and this time with pieces of buffalo meat floating in it. We stopped in a little shack where the whole family slept out the back of where we ate. They were so friendly and pleased to see us. Finally we arrived in Zaberry. I've got to say it's a really one-horse town with a very tired hotel. Their Wi-Fi had stopped working because they had no money to pay the bill apparently. We were cut off from the outside world. But after several beer lao and a surprisingly good meal at some place we found in the main street, it didn't really seem to matter. Now we woke the next morning to thick mist and it was really cold. There was no breakfast at the hotel, so Bernard and I walked down the main street in our full biking gear, trying to warm up, as we looked for some coffee or something other than noodle soup for breakfast. We did find a place that had its fire going and the pots were boiling, and we managed to get them to cook 2 eggs each for us. And the coffee, that was like black treacle. After breakfast we set off for the Thai border, about 180 kilometres away. Now the road through the mountains was up and down and twisty, fantastic scenery, children waving, and of course the large amount of loose gravel on the corners and a few potholes to keep us focused. And then we met the elephants. 6 of them, 6 working elephants lumbering along. So great to see. I love Laos. It's so simple and laid back and friendly.
Sabadi.
Now the last few miles to the Thai border was a great piece of road up in the mountains, but as we were to find out, it had diesel dropped by trucks on some of the corners. Now I was following Duncan and definitely had a few twitches from the rear tyre on one particular corner. It felt a bit like I'd got a puncture. And we pulled over to admire the scenery and to wait for Bernard and Alan, who were somewhere behind us. We waited, but no sign of them. So we doubled back and found that Bernard had crashed his bike on one of these dodgy corners due to the diesel impregnated tarmac. Thankfully, apart from his dented pride, he and the bike were okay. It turned out that this was the first time he'd ever crashed a motorbike, he said, in all his years of riding. Unbelievable. Definitely a photo opportunity then. Border crossing went smoothly, and we were soon on our way into northern Thailand, with 3,000 kilometres of this trip already behind us. We stopped for another bowl of noodle soup, and then we rode the last 50 kilometres to our hotel. The road was billiard smooth with lovely bends to blast through, and we were there in no time. The hotel turned out to be a collection of quaint little chalets. Duncan knew the owner, and we were greeted as long-lost friends. The plan was to stay here in Thung Chang for 2 nights so that we could ride more of the best roads, and then we'd move on to Chiang Rai and finally return to Chiang Mai on Sunday the 14th of February. After a nice breakfast of eggs and sausage and tomato with some homemade bread, we set off at 9 AM for a loop through the mountains of rural northern Thailand. It was very cold to start, so we needed an extra layer. Roads were twisty, but still the inevitable potholes and stretches of dirt road now and again. Up and down we went through great scenery, not much traffic and very few people. Just a few hill tribe ladies, who seemed very pleased to see us. On one particular narrow and winding stretch through the jungle, I happened to encounter a pickup truck coming straight towards me as the driver took the racing line through a series of S-bends. I needed to take immediate avoiding action, which caused me to ride straight down into a ditch by the side of the road. Now Duncan and Bernard were up ahead and had not seen what had happened, and when they rode back they found Alan and I trying to pull my bike out of the ditch. The only solution was for me to try and ride the bike out, which luckily I managed to do before Bernard could take any photos. So bike and ride are okay, and probably Bernard feeling better now as we both crashed. And by the way, it was not the first time I'd ever crashed a motorbike. So on we rode through the breathtaking scenery, everywhere so green, covered in foliage. The sun came out, the temperature rose, and time for lunch in a nice place up on the hills. At one point we decided to explore a side road, which was great until it turned into dirt and loose gravel, kicking up clouds of white dust, and then a big truck came towards us and we were covered in a fog of dust, just couldn't see, scary. We got back on the main road and started to ride through the valley and the rice fields. Temperature now is mid-30s. We stopped to take a pic and happened to notice a nail in Alan's rear tyre. So we needed to find a little bike shop with an airline. It's far too hot to use the hand pump. Sure enough, a few miles further on we found one. The guy there dropped everything and he pulled the nail, which was about 1.5 inches, plugged the hole, and 10 minutes later we were on our way again. 100 baht, £2, top man. Amazingly, this was the only issue we had, in spite of all the punishment the bikes had taken. And then off for more good riding and back at the hotel for 4 o'clock and some cold beer. Now the previous night the lady of the house had cooked us a very tasty meal, and we had more of the same tonight. We've eaten really well everywhere we've been. Great food over here and lovely people. But I must say the bathroom plumbing leaves a lot to be desired. Now for some reason there's never any hot water supply in the sink. It's no fun shaving in cold water. The shower head rarely reaches the sink, and if it does, there's never a plug in the sink. And as for the bum gun by the toilet, would you fancy a blast of cold water up your nether regions early in the morning? Obviously an acquired taste. It's now Saturday 13th of Feb and our penultimate day on the road. After eggs and sausage we left our little hotel chalets and set off for Chiang Rai. It was about 280 miles through mountains and hills. Great roads, smooth tarmac, combination of sweepers and some tighter corners, up and down hill, nice temperature, fantastic scenery. We then joined the 1148. Now this has miles and miles of fantastic sweepers. We waved to a group of bikers coming the other way, all on BMW GS Adventures. Apparently the bike of choice for the wealthy Thai rider. We took a detour to ride up through a national park and found a great coffee stop up in the hills. Later on we had lunch, noodle soup, different noodles this time, flat ones, chopsticks not needed. Now by now it's really hot, 50 kilometres left to Chiang Rai. We rode into town sweating among the traffic. Thankfully not a very big town, and we were soon at the hotel, which was well air conditioned. We decided a cold beer round the pool was a good idea, only to find that it was full of rubble. They'd decided to renovate just at the start of the hot season. Crazy logic. So we had a shower and then went on to the bar next door. And that night we ate fish and chips with peas. Time for a change from all that spicy food. So we then came to our last day, February the 14th. We left Chiang Rai at 9 AM to ride the last 280 kilometres to Chiang Mai, through the twisties in the mountains again. On the way we stopped at the White Temple, unusual as they're all usually golden here. Now, it would have been rude not to do one temple while we're here. We soon got into the mountains and more great roads up and down with corners of all sorts and a few potholes and diesel spills to keep us honest. We had a coffee stop right up in the hills, great scenery, ideal for a Sunday ride. As we descended the mountain, the temperature rose, and now in the high 30s. Thankfully, the next 80 odd kilometres was fairly straight and we could keep a good pace. The wind helped to cool us. We stopped about 50 kilometres from Chiang Mai for a snack, a piece of cranberry pie and cappuccino as a change from noodle soup. We were ready for the last lap into Chiang Mai and ready to fight with the swarming Sunday traffic. It was really hot. We seemed to catch every red light, and now we have the heat from the engine and the sun. We're getting sweaty. Each getaway from the lights is like a Moto GP start. Now we always win the drag race, but then the locals catch up, and they're so good at weaving in and out of the traffic, we're lost for dead. Finally we arrive at Tony's Big Bikes and we change into our day clothes. The ride is over. About 3,500 miles behind us, or should I say kilometres, which is about 2,100 odd miles. Great riding, new experiences daily. But the adventure's not over yet. We've still got 2 nights in Chiang Mai. And we checked into our hotel, which was the same guest house I stayed at last year, with the friendly Thai lady who likes a drink and is often hungover in the morning. That night we went to watch a Muay Thai boxing match. Beer was served by a rough-looking lady boy. These fighters are small, wiry guys, not an ounce of fat on them. They smell of Sloane's liniment was heavy in the air. They went at each other hammer and tongs, and most fights were stopped by a knockout. And so to bed we went, a chance to take it easy the next day and maybe see another temple. We had a leisurely start, omelettes for breakfast, then off into the heat of the day to explore the old town of Chiang Mai and to have a look at the temples. Stopped for a cold beer and a light lunch, and then got ready to meet Duncan and Alan again for our last night meal. Burmese is the plan. Now they turned up on scooters and brought with them Bo, Duncan's Thai girlfriend. We had a couple of beers, then off to the restaurant. Now, I was given Bo's scooter to take Bernard on the back. Strangely, Bernard didn't seem too keen on the pillion idea. And we were given helmets. Mine was a nice little pink one. The scooter was twist and go, no clutch. Instead, the left-hand lever was the rear brake. All very confusing. Off we wobbled. Must have been all that weight on the back. So we had the Burmese meal, which was very good and quite different from Thai. It was decided we should head off to a bar to finish the evening on the scooters again. Bernard seemed keen to drive this time. Can't think why. So we made it back to the hotel in one piece and said our farewells to Duncan and Alan. These are 2 good guys whom we had now spent 14 days with and shared many experiences. Next morning we were off to the airport. Goodbye Thailand, land of smiles, till next time. We've got a 1 hour down to Bangkok and then 11 hours to London on Thai Airways and back to the cold and grey British winter. And finally, looking back at some main moments that come to mind. The people we met along the way, friendly and always smiling. The crazy driving in Cambodia. The food we ate. The culture we experienced. The fantastic scenery in the mountains. The simple life of people in this region. So much in contrast to ours. The heat, 35 plus degrees, is hot. The roads, good, bad and ugly. We had everything. Noodle soup for lunch, cooked in a big pot. The killing fields in Cambodia left a real impression. The lost city of Angkor Wat from the 12th century. And ladyboys everywhere. Then there were the elephants along the road. And hotel plumbing left a lot to be desired. The toilet facilities in the wilds, not for the faint-hearted. That Honda 500 CBX I rode, handle everything we threw at it, and it crashed well. The myriad scooters and motorbikes, family transport for the masses over here. 5 on a bike was the most I saw. The enjoyment of riding without worrying about speed cameras or police made a real change. The border crossings, so much paperwork, and the payoff made to the Cambodian customs excise. Singa beer and Lao beer, loads of it, and of course the great healthy food. Finally, thanks again to Duncan and Alan from Tony's Big Bikes. I look forward to seeing you again next year. It's a great way to break up the long British winter. And Bernard, of course, my motorcycle touring buddy, always up for an adventure. Okay, so thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. It certainly was good for me to relive those biking adventures, especially while I'm locked down due to this coronavirus and had to cancel all the 2020 trips that had been planned. Now I've got other interesting adventures such as the Myanmar and also Norway Arctic Circle trips. I may well create videos for those too while I'm locked down here, so please keep tuned, and let me say bye for now. Keep safe and ride safe.